Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Assassin's Creed Mirage. I'm your host, Colors Fade. I know I'm a year late to this review. I purchased Mirage on launch day, but due to the release schedules of other titles and a very packed backlog of my own, I didn't get a chance to play it until recently. And now that I have, I feel like I need to discuss it. Mirage is Ubisoft's attempt to return to the stealth and parkour gameplay style that made the original Assassin's Creed trilogy so successful. Unfortunately, I never played those games. My first exposure to the Assassin's Creed franchise came with Origins. I love nearly everything about that game, especially the fact that it's set in ancient Egypt. I love the big open world, pyramids, panoramic vistas, the rivers and lakes, and the variety of combat. I also really dig the voice acting of Bayek of Siwa, and he remains my favorite character in any Ubisoft game, though Cassandra from Odyssey and female Dani from Far Cry 6 are right behind him. That said, as any longtime fan of the series will tell you, Origins is not indicative of the original Assassin's Creed experience. Origins, as well as Odyssey and Valhalla after him, are all part of the open world trilogy, and none of those games are a good benchmark for how the early Assassin's Creed games played. The trilogy of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla feature massive open worlds, expansive RPG skill trees, and are much more centered around melee combat as opposed to stealth and parkour. And though I really do like all three of those games, I also understand the complaints players have lobbied against them over the years. Fans of the original Assassin's Creed games have noted that the open world trilogy games are just too big and too long, each taking 100 or more hours to complete. For a while now, fans have wanted Ubisoft to return to their roots and make a shorter, more focused game centered on stealth and parkour. So does Mirage succeed at this? Since I never played the original trilogy, I can't definitively say whether it mimics those early titles or not. All I can do is describe my experience with it and let you decide. But let me say this. I went into this game with very low expectations and was more than pleasantly surprised by the end. I generally don't like games that focus entirely on stealth. I much prefer the approach that Ubisoft takes with the Far Cry series and the open world Assassin's Creed trilogy, where stealth is optional. In those games, players can opt for stealth or they can take a more direct approach. Quite often, a stealthy approach turns into open warfare as soon as enemies detect the player. I love that about Ubisoft's games, and it's a huge reason why I keep coming back to them. But Mirage is a stealth game through and through. It's not a game where you want to get caught in the open against multiple enemies. And because of that, I didn't think I'd like it as much as I like the other Ubisoft titles I played. And yet, by the time the credits rolled, I had a completely different opinion about Assassin's Creed Mirage. The story takes place in a beautifully rendered version of ancient Baghdad and follows the character of Basim as he rises from lowly street thief into the ranks of master assassin in the Hidden Ones. He is someone we first met way back in Assassin's Creed Valhalla when he was quite a bit older. Now, I have to give Ubisoft massive credit with how they present this story, because right off the bat they fix one of my biggest complaints with the open world trilogy of games, and that is their inclusion of the present day plotline that centers on the Animus. In particular, I hate how those games jarringly and unnecessarily inject the character of Layla into their stories. For those who don't know, Layla Hassan is a contemporary character who appears in a number of cutscenes in the 3 prior games. Her presence is meant to further the ongoing plotline regarding the Animus project, which is how people from present day are able to dive into the genetic memories of their predecessors and experience all of these ancient events regarding the Order of the Ancients and the Hidden Ones via a hyper-realistic form of virtual reality. But that contemporary plotline lost its steam a long time ago, in my opinion, and has become a hindrance to these stories set in ancient times. There is simply nothing more jarring and unpleasant than being jerked out of the immersive and beautiful experience of exploring ancient Egypt just to deal with stupid Layla and her boring-ass contemporary story. The Layla sequences add absolutely nothing to the game and are really frustrating to deal with because they can't be skipped. With Mirage, Ubisoft seems to have finally got the message from the players, and we are treated to a game that has not one single contemporary character or cutscene in it. There's no mention of the Animus or any modern day character like Layla. Instead, we get an opening cutscene that basically says, "Here's a story I haven't told you yet," and then we dive straight in. This, in my opinion, is how every Assassin's Creed story from here on out should operate. The Animus had its day, but that time is past. Ubisoft just needs to tell these ancient stories in as immersive a manner as possible, because these worlds and characters are too good for jarring and unnecessary interruptions. Thankfully, Ubisoft has done that with Mirage, and I was incredibly happy to see it start off on this foot. As far as the specifics of the story go, it is reminiscent of the other Assassin's Creed games that came directly before it. The Order of the Ancients is up to no good in Baghdad, and it's up to Basim and the Hidden Ones to track them down and eliminate them. It's nothing overly complex, and it doesn't need to be. It does the job. How the game presents this story in terms of the user interface is a bit different than the prior trilogy, however. Instead of a linear list of quests, we're given a visual representation of investigations that we must undertake. Completing each investigation unlocks a clue. If enough clues are unlocked, a target is revealed. It could be argued that this change in presentation is nothing more than a new coat of paint over the top of the tried and true quest system, and that's true. I still found it refreshing all the same. I like this approach, and I look forward to seeing something similar in future Ubisoft games. Mirage is without question a stealth game. In the beginning, if a situation goes sideways and turns into open melee combat, the best option is to run away and break line of sight with the enemy so Basim can re-engage stealth. However, later in the game, he unlocks enough tools and abilities that even large groups of enemies can be quickly dispatched. And it's at this point that the game really becomes fun, as Basim is living up to his full potential. And that's where I think Ubisoft did a really great job with this game, in creating a system of progression that ultimately makes Basim feel like a badass. Initially, Basim only has access to a sword and a dagger for melee, along with throwing knives for ranged attacks. This is a little disconcerting, especially for someone like me who came from Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla and is accustomed to having archery at their disposal. But it doesn't take long to get used to the limitations of this game and to understand why it eschews archery altogether. The fact is, if archery existed in this game, everything would have been way easier. The challenge in Mirage thus lies with staying hidden, sneaking up close, and dispatching targets with the hidden blade. That sounds like a fairly simple game loop, and it is, but Ubisoft has made it fun by creating a progression for Basim where his arsenal of tools is constantly expanding and evolving, giving him new and interesting ways to dispatch enemies. The neat thing about the tools is that they can be upgraded with new abilities. For instance, the smoke bomb is a great way for Basim to easily assassinate multiple enemies in close proximity to one another. However, depending on how the player chooses to upgrade the smoke bomb, it can also be used to cause memory wipe to enemies caught in its radius, allowing Basim to use it as a getaway tool as well. That sort of weapon customization is really nice because it allows players to shape, to a small degree, how they play the game. By the end, Basim has access to throwing knives, sleep darts, smoke bombs, noisemakers, and even traps. He ends up with so many effective tools that there aren't many situations he can't handle. But the icing on the cake is the assassin's focus. As Basim makes stealth kills, he fills up a focus meter in the lower left-hand corner of the display. Each segment on the focus bar can be used to make an automatically successful assassination in a chain of assassinations. This becomes a fantastic way to clear multiple enemies from a space, and I have to say it was my favorite part of the game. I love it when developers give players tools like these that have to be charged up and saved so they can be exploited at the perfect strategic moment. I really hope this feature makes it into future Assassin's Creed games. In addition to all the tools Basim can acquire, he earns a limited number of skill points that he can use to unlock certain abilities, and he can also pay to improve his weapons and armor. But those improvements are minor compared to the raw power of his tools, like the darts and smoke bombs, which are what makes him a truly formidable opponent. Now, despite its focus on stealth, sometimes combat does turn into a melee affair. For those moments, Basim makes use of a sword and a parry dagger. Parrying attacks is the most effective way to defeat enemies in open combat, because a successful parry can stagger an opponent, allowing Basim to execute a finishing move. However, the red attacks from heavily armored opponents can't be parried, so players need to circle around them and attack from behind where those enemies have less armor. As such, these heavily armored foes become priority targets for Basim to kill via stealth, explosions, or other environmental methods. All in all, the combat in Mirage provides enough variety to be fun. I am typically not a huge stealth fan, but even I quickly grew to love Mirage's approach. Parrying is incredibly satisfying in open combat, and the assassin's focus skill was a blast to save up and execute. In addition to all the assassin-related gameplay, Mirage provides a method for Basim to pickpocket unsuspecting targets. This is the main way he earns coin for upgrades, and as it turns out, it's an incredibly simple and satisfying game mechanic. Using Basim's eagle vision, he can discern if people nearby are carrying coin purses or other valuables. Pickpocketing them is as simple as waiting for a rapidly closing indicator to fall inside a mark's sweet spot. Press the same button a second time while the indicator is inside the blue diamond, and Basim will successfully pickpocket the coin purse undetected. But there are times when even the best laid plans go awry, and Basim will find his notoriety growing, making him a target for every guard with a line of sight to him. His notoriety escalates from level 1 to level 3, and at level 3 a special assassin is sent after him. If you can defeat that foe, his notoriety will reset back to 0. However, there are 2 other safer and quicker ways to reduce Basim's notoriety. The first involves paying a nearby town crier to clear his name, but the more interesting and fun approach is to hunt down wanted posters and tear them down. Each time Basim rips down a wanted poster, his notoriety drops by 1 level. The benefit of that method is that it doesn't cost any money, and it's not that difficult to search out and find the posters with eagle vision. I absolutely loved this part of the game, and it's another mechanic that I hope makes it into future Ubisoft titles. As far as graphics and sound go, the game is serviceable on all fronts. The graphical fidelity is basically what we've come to expect since Origins, with a few upgrades. I tend to love Ubisoft's approach to environmental design, so I don't have any complaints in this regard. They do a great job, in my opinion, of recreating historic locations and giving us beautiful vistas to gawk at. The sound effects are good as well, and the music, while not as uniquely memorable as the soundtrack to Origins, is solid. The biggest complaint I've heard from players about the open world trilogy of games, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, is that they simply are too big and take too long to complete. They're filled with meaningless side quests that don't advance the plot, and players have just gotten to the point where they're burned out on games that take over 100 hours to play. In this regard, Ubisoft seems to have listened to the feedback, because Mirage only took me 40 hours to finish. And honestly, it felt like the perfect amount of time for this game. By the time the credits rolled, I was simultaneously ready for the game to be over, and I was also sad that it was coming to an end. You know that bittersweet feeling, right? To me, that is the mark of a good game, and that's what I felt when the credits rolled. Where the game falls down a little bit, at least for me, and this is a very minor gripe, is with the parkour. Baghdad makes for the kind of environment that has a lot of potential for parkour, with its many connected rooftops and narrow alleyways. But Basim's character animations felt janky to me, as if the different animations that make up a parkour sequence couldn't be connected properly. I spent quite a bit of time feeling frustrated at the jerking animations as Basim would try and transition from one object he was standing on to the next, wondering why the transition animations just didn't feel as seamless as they should. In the end, I just lived with it, but in a game where parkour is such a big part of traversing the world, this felt like the part of Mirage that needed more time to bake, like the development team needed a few more weeks to smooth it all out or something. It felt especially jarring to me since I was coming directly from the open world trilogy of games like Origins, where the character animations just feel a lot smoother. The other complaint I have, and again this is very minor, is that the city of Baghdad itself lacks variety. From one district to the next, it all kind of looks the same. There are a few times when missions take the player to unique locations outside the city, and these were welcome breaks from the sameness of Baghdad streets. I really wish the outlying areas had been expanded and utilized more, so we could have taken a break from the sameness of the city more frequently. Again, this is a minor complaint, and I don't think this is really Ubisoft's fault. It's just the setting itself. But I do wish the different districts could have had a bit more variety in them to help set them apart and make them more memorable. All in all, I enjoyed my time with Mirage quite a bit, more than I anticipated, in fact. Anytime a game surprises me, I think it's worth talking about. The story in Mirage is fairly pedestrian. It's just the Hidden Ones taking down the Order of the Ancients as usual, but it serves its purpose. The voice acting is very good. The gameplay loop is solid and feels satisfying to play, and the progression of power makes playing Basim a lot of fun. Toward the end of the game, he had so many powerful tools at his disposal that it felt like a true master assassin, like he could wade into any situation no matter how outnumbered and walk out the victor. And just to reiterate, I have never played the first 3 Assassin's Creed games, so I can't say definitively how close Mirage comes to mimicking the gameplay of those titles, but my guess is that it comes pretty close. At the very minimum, this is a game that is focused on stealth and parkour, yet still leans heavily on a progression-based system of power acquisition, so that the end of the game plays much differently than the beginning. And that to me is why the game works, because that progression of power is smooth and enjoyable. I personally also really love that Ubisoft dropped all the Animus nonsense from this game and focused entirely on the setting of Baghdad and the characters of this era. There are no jarring cutaways to modern day, no annoying Layla characters to disrupt the immersion, nothing like that. This is just Basim and Baghdad, and that's the way it should be. As a person who generally doesn't like stealth-focused games, I enjoyed this quite a lot. To the point where now I want to see what other stealth-focused games are out there and if any of them are as much fun as Assassin's Creed Mirage was. So there you have it, my review of Assassin's Creed Mirage. As always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and a comment and consider subscribing. I'll see you next time, and until then, happy gaming everyone.